There are three things you can do to help us out.
1, you can make sure you subscribe to this channel.
2 is you can leave a comment here or on Apple Podcasts.
And 3, if you really want to help, you can follow this link to see how you could be a supporter on Patreon.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
Welcome to another Word in Your Attic, where we're joined by the Guardian's chief music critic, the man who wrote the recent and hysterically funny and revealing and wonderful memoir of Elton John. It is the great Alexis Petridis. Alexis, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's lovely. I remember now that Dave and I first met you when we were all working at the magazine publisher EMAP.
Indeed.
And you were on the dance title Mixmag. This
Absolutely.
would have been, I don't know, for about 25 years ago. Yeah. And what I remember about Mixmag is that it was all about the weekend, and that everybody would kind of leave the office on about Thursday, and then very slowly they would start to reappear, probably late Tuesday, looking wan and dilapidated. You know? Does that ring any bells?
Yes, you would have these terrible Wednesdays. Where the excesses of the weekend would sort of catch up with people.
Yeah.
And people would sort of burst into tears for no reason. It's really a psychological environment to be trying to put a magazine together in. But yes, it was all about the weekend. My misspent youth. It was great. I loved working at Mixmag. Absolutely. It was my first job. I went there as a work experience.
Yeah, work experience. I remember, yeah.
I carried on and stayed there and worked my way up. And it was just fabulous. It was a fantastic environment for a sort of first job for a journalist.
When you think of the places you could have gone to for work experience, the idea of work experience on Mixmag, particularly back in the day, it's like a contradiction in terms.
Really. The course I was on, the journalism course I was on, which was at City University, they very much geared you towards trade titles. Solid job, you get some money.
Absolutely.
And so other people were going to sort of tunnels and tunneling magazines.
There you go. Plastics and Rubber Weekly.
That's right.
There was a guy who went to a magazine.
Underfloor lagging
repairman. Yeah. So it was a magazine all about being a TV repairman. I went to Mixmag, and it was brilliant. It was terrific. And the great thing about it was that because Mixmag had kind of evolved out of this slightly sort of tacky newsletter for DJs, is what it started at, as in the 80s. And then Acid House had happened, and it had sort of just grown organically into this magazine. Nobody really knew what they were doing. Everybody was sort of busking it. Everyone was kind of making it up as it went along. And I thought that was a really fantastic environment. To me, I learned so much because they took me on as production editor originally. And I lied, and I said I had all these qualifications from City University in production, which I didn't. And I was removed from the post of production editor after about 3 months after some disastrous business that involved Cornwall to rescue something from the printers that I'd done right. It was awful. It was
Well, you had to go to St Ives, did you? Yeah, I bet you did.
Discard, I believe it was.
Oh, right.
Yes.
So I had to sort of go and rescue something that the caption was upside down or something.
Oh, well, if that's the worst.
That's a sackable offence.
Yeah, it was really, people were really angry.
Oh, yeah.
And, clearly I couldn't go, I don't know what I'm doing because I lied to you. But what I did think at the time was, why would you think I'd sat and passed these exams? I've been here all along. I never really left. I went for a work experience. They kept me on a bit longer. You had to do a second work experience. I went there. I never went back to college. I basically stayed working and then lied and said I had these qualifications. While I was supposed to be doing the exams, I was literally there.
You could have figured that out precisely.
It was all their fault, basically.
Well, look, we should take you back to the beginning, as we traditionally do, and the record playing equipment in the family home. Which the family home as well? Was it Sunderland? Where were you born? I can't remember.
My mum is from Sunderland. And initially we lived there when I was very little. And then we moved to Yorkshire. I grew up in a place called Silsden, which is near Keighley.
Oh, wow.
Near Bradford. But you ask about the record playing equipment in the house, and I have pictorial evidence of the record.
Oh, wow.
Good, fantastic.
Good. I found this. This is can you see this? This is a photograph of me on my second birthday.
Wonderful.
Difficult to imagine.
Already on percussion.
already on percussion and with a record player there in the background. There is the family. It wasn't a dance set. It was kind of like a version thereof. You know what I mean? It was a thing with a lid, and the sound quality changed if you shut the lid.
Yeah,
and stack singles up on it and that kind of thing.
What would have been on it? That's fantastic. That's so lovely, that picture too. What would have been on it?
What would have been on it? It would have been, so I was 2, so it would have been 1973. Glam records. I think I had them. My parents, the records my parents had. Should I put this away now? We don't need to do it.
Yeah. Your parents played glam. How wonderful.
Well, my parents didn't play glam, but it's a slightly odd and complicated story that I only found out about recently. My dad told me a couple of years ago that when I was a kid, really little, there was the general consensus of opinion within the wider family was that there was something wrong with me, because all I used to do, I wasn't really interested in toys. I wasn't really interested in anything. I used to sit in the corner of the room looking at singles, going through singles and looking at them. And
Wonderful.
So other relations would come around and go, the band isn't right. You should take him to see somebody because this is. So they bought me from a really young age. My parents bought me records, singles, as kind of almost like toys. So I remember having things like, My Cuckoo by Alvin Stardust.
Yeah.
I would have been really, really young to have those records, So that's a slightly odd thing about my upbringing. I can't explain what I was doing. My dad thinks I learned to read by reading record labels. I don't know if that's true or not. I have no idea. I don't remember. I do remember.
I want that to be true.
I'd love that. Yeah. Wouldn't it be great?
Yeah. So your spelling would, when looking at Slade records, would have been quite complicated. Docked 3 points. See me. Yeah.
So there would have been that. My parents had the sort of usual records that a young couple, setting up homes together with a child in the 70s would have. They had Elton John records, Beatles, the 2 Beatles Red and Blue compilations, Band on the Run, Jordan Sullivan, that kind of thing, and the record of my parents' records, I've got here actually my parents' copy of it, which was the one that impacted on me when I was young, is this, which is the Carpenters
singles,
which is a fantastic record.
Really good.
It's a brilliant. I mean, it is genuinely a brilliant album. It was all sort of, they re-recorded stuff and they
such a fantastic singer. She's so good.
Amazing singer. And I think the reason it stuck with me is because my mum used to listen to it on an afternoon when she was doing the ironing in the front room. And I remember listening to Rainy Days and Mondays and distinctly remember this and thinking, this song is sort of happening somewhere like this. Do you know what I mean? There was a sort of the sense of place. It was happening. It seemed to be about a housewife in a. Do you know what I mean? It just fitted.
Yeah.
Whereas I didn't know what mood. My dad liked the Rolling Stones. I don't know what mood Brown Sugar fitted, but it wasn't the mood in our house.
No.
Yes.
And so there was something about a sort of sense of place and this music that really stuck.
Right.
And I've loved the Carpenters. I've loved the Carpenters ever since.
Can you remember buying where you bought records from? Can you remember the shop that you used to go to?
We used to. It wasn't. There wasn't, as far as I remember, a local record shop. It was Boots, Woolworths, WH Smith. Everywhere used to sell records.
It did.
70s.
Yeah, it did.
Really, and that's a sort of odd thing that you now have to go. Brighton is fairly well stocked for record shops.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah,
it's not as well stocked as you think. I mean,
it's probably more of them making less money.
But that's where I remember. I don't remember going into sort of specialist record shops until I was about sort of 10, and I probably went to an HMV shop in Bradford but before that, it was all. Everything was bought from Boots or Woolies or Smiths. That's where our records came from. Oh, apart from yes, my parents had my grandmother owned a laundrette, and as a result of this, my parents had a cash and carry card. They could go to Macro.
Oh right,
God, yes.
You get stuff, huge boxes of things.
Absolutely.
And so on a Sunday, the Macro card would be produced, and my dad used to buy records there as well. I have a distinct memory of, he would buy, my dad had this really weird thing that he somehow collated the monetary value of the record with its quality, in the sense that the cheaper the record was, the better it was likely to be.
It's true.
Didn't all parents feel the same way?
It's true.
We're going back to the embassy label conversation again.
That sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the cover version. So they're cheap. You get more of them too.
Yeah, you can barely tell them. And I remember he would, he really liked, my dad also liked soul music, and he liked Marvin Gaye and Gladys Knight and the Pips. But instead of going out and buying the Marvin Gaye album that he would have wanted, that had I heard it through the grapevine, which is the Marvin Gaye song, he bought the cheapest one he could possibly find, which was this thing on MFP.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It was not the same era of Marvin Gaye. It was all recorded in like 1963 or something like that. And then expressed disappointment when he got it home.
Yeah.
You read the track listing.
None of the tracks I like.
Yeah,
Had he not bothered to check that? No.
No, it's just
thinking, wow.
99p, that'll do.
Exactly.
Brilliant. That'll be great. So Macro. We got records from Macro, the cash.
Yeah. How did you hear stuff? Did you hear from the radio, or did you watch some of the pops, or what was the other channels of getting hold of music?
When I was growing up, Top of the Pops was the thing. Top of the Pops was obviously the major, source of sort of knowledge about music. But the thing that I sort of remember is that TV in the 70s had music all the time. Kids TV programs, there were music dedicated kids TV programs, whether it's things like sort of Shang-a-Lang, Mark Bolan's TV show. Oh God, what else did they have? Arrows, I think, had a TV show.
Supersonic.
The Arrows.
With the Q, whatever he's.
Yeah, Q.
Mark Bolan had a TV show, didn't he?
Yeah, he said that's right. He did.
Yeah, Mark Bolan had a TV show. So there was also that. There was this sense, and also rock bands would seem to appear on other programs all the time. Which I'm not sure if it's true. That's true now. I don't know if they're on kids' TV, but there was definitely a sort of an interface between children's entertainment and what was going on in the charts. Stuff, I suppose in a way there's an aspect of that era's music of glam rock that is really aimed at a very young audience.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I think it's probably the first music, apart from probably bubblegum, things like the Archies and stuff, that is quite explicitly aimed at an audience. Some aspects of it are quite explicitly aimed at an audience that are younger than teenagers.
Yeah, that's true.
There's lots of footage of hungover groups like the Clash who've had to stay up all night, dragged onto, to be interviewed by Timmy Mallet or something at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. It's quite funny, really.
They always used to love going on Tiswas, didn't they? That was the great.
Yeah, Tiswas.
They get Lemmy to go on Tiswas. Well, obviously Lemmy had been up all week, but they could get Lemmy to go on Tiswas, or Saxon would go on Tiswas because they really.
That's right.
Saxon on Tiswas. They will have done.
Yes.
So that was the sort of source of the main source of, I think, of sort of music was TV rather than radio. I don't really remember listening to the radio that much. No, I really don't. I don't. I remember listening to the charts on a Sunday evening, but other than that, no. I was
right.
Do you remember the first actual single you bought? Have you still got it, or?
Do I remember the first single I bought? I don't know, because it's very confused with being bought singles, and I can't remember the first one that I actually ponied up the money for myself.
Yeah.
I can't remember. It would have been somewhere in the late 70s. I have a confession. People always say to me, "What was the first album?" People always say to me, nobody ever says that. People stop me in the street.
People, please, just leave me alone. Yeah.
Come on. When people, friends have asked, what was the first album you bought with your own money? And I've twisted the truth, and I've always said it was Kings of the Wild Frontier by Adam and the Ants.
Oh, right.
But now confess, okay.
The reality of it was the first album I bought with my own money was Initial Success by B.A. Robertson. Which is...
That's fantastic.
That's great.
B.A. Robertson also was...
B.A. Robertson, Cool in the Caftan.
Cool in the Caftan, To Be or Not to Be.
That's right.
String of hits. He was never off the multicolored swatch.
That's true.
True.
He was constantly. I've noticed in those Top of the Pops repeats, B.A. Robertson was always in reception for Top of the Pops.
Yes, he was. He lived at Telly Centre. Probably never moved.
And he appealed to kids who were sufficiently young to not realise that he was actually really old.
Yes,
wasn't he? I mean, B.A. Robertson was kind of one of those guys who must have been, I don't know, in his 30s or something. Something seemed impossibly old at the time.
It's just come to me. I interviewed him for Smash Hits at the height of his fame.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Can you remember? Was there any?
I know where I interviewed him at Mayfair Recording Studios in South Moulton Street, is all I remember. And he was very tall.
Yes.
And but then he kind of disappeared as a pop star. But he was still around, wasn't he? He did all kinds of. Didn't he write other stuff for other people?
Yeah, he did.
Living Years for Mike and the Mechanics is the famous thing.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, absolutely.
I could see a palpable sense of real excitement there from you, Alexis, with David saying, "I once interviewed B.A. Robertson." You were like, "Wow!"
It's a very weird thing because when during lockdown, I think I was looking for some sort of, I don't know what, nostalgic reverie or whatever. And I thought, why don't I listen to some albums that I remember from my youth, but that I've never listened to subsequently? And so I got on the Sonos with the Spotify and put on Initial Success by B.A. Robertson.
Yeah.
It is awful. It is so awful. And so it was that, and there was a Thompson Twins album that I listened to as well that I liked when I was sort of 11. And they were both appalling. And the B.A. Robertson record was so appalling, I didn't even get the Proustian kind of this awful man with his smug lyrics, you know.
This is really interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, one of the things of being of great age, like Mark and I are, you know, that we kind of remember when everybody had their moment, and then they disappeared for years and years and years. And then slowly, over a long period of time, they re-emerge, and people say, do you know, they were actually really good. Yeah. And so you can count the fingers of one hand the number of acts who never had that moment. I think
Thompson Twins is a really good example. Thompson Twins they were really good records. We were at Smash Hits Stars, the editor of Smash Hits. I put them on the cover twice, and they were Doctor. You know, they were kind of nice. They're quite interesting songs. But when you look back at them, almost immediately afterwards, they were completely soulless. Yes. They were completely manufactured. There was something about that group that I remember seeing the Thompson Twins when they were a kind of 9-piece. They were a kind of radical political group, and he looked just like Rick Mayall from The Young Ones. And used to have, do you remember that? He used to have little dreadlocks and pigtails at the back. Yes. You know, I saw them at the Hope and Anchor, and then suddenly they reappeared as this kind of video age trio. You know. I'm intrigued by the meeting because they were always playing, you know, the Elephant Fair when there was millions of the Thompson Twins. They were always playing these kind of, you know, anarchist sort of events, or Glastonbury when it wasn't, you know, whatever, or, you know, things at Stonehenge. You know, they were always doing that. And there must have been a meeting at some point. Yeah.
And I really want to know how that meeting went and because 1 minute it was this, and then the next minute.
Yeah, we're going to drop the politics, and we're also going to drop you 8 guys as well. Sorry. I'm just me, my girlfriend, and this guy Joe, who just looks really cool. And
didn't they end up on Live Aid playing with Madonna?
They did. Doing a cover of Revolution.
Performed with Madonna.
But yes, what did the rest of that group think when they saw them on top of the pops? They must have been spitting blood.
Well, maybe they were, or maybe they were like, thank God. You know, it was. I think it was it Wayne Hussey? The most in the Mission had been in Dead or Alive.
Yeah,
and he considered it a very narrow escape that he got chucked out of Dead or Alive before they had to go. He would have had to go on top of the pops and mime to their cover version of "That's the Way I Like It" by Casey and the Sunshine Band. Very injurious to his credibility. So maybe they thought. Maybe they're all. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they would have thought. It's a very odd thing when you hear music from that. I'm very interested in music. I'm very interested in the sort of music you like before you are able to make informed choices about it, you know, and there's something pure about that music. You know,
Petridis' book is a lot of that is about that.
He's great about
it's all about, isn't it? It's about the Wombles, you know.
Yeah, it's about the Wombles and things like that. And I think there's a sort of certain sense that you never really get over that music. It's always there somewhere in the back of your mind.
No, yes.
Sure. Still, you know, as I said, the first music I remember hearing was glam rock, and still absolutely, you know, I love glam. It's probably that and disco are my 2 favorite genres. I don't know. And I'm equally interested in the music that doesn't hold any, that is from that era, but doesn't hold any of that kind of attraction for you. And like I said, I put the Thompson Twins album on. I was like, this is just awful. This is appalling. How could it be this record, which was recorded at Compass Point Studios with all the people who's got Grace Jones on it? It's Alex Sakin produced it, all these things. And it's just awful. And
it's so hollow, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, it's a grotty old thing.
Well, that's them dealt with anyway. Yes. So if they were considering a comeback.
Alannah Currie from Carpenters lives somewhere around here, actually. She lives in Brighton with her husband. She's married to Jimmy Corty from the KLF.
No,
Really?
I thought he lived in New Zealand. He was a DJ in New Zealand, wasn't he? Maybe.
Who? Tom Bailey.
Tom Bailey, yeah.
Tom Bailey, yeah, but she's now married to Jimmy Courty from the KLF, and she makes furniture out of taxidermized animals.
Yes.
Oh my Lord, that's brilliant.
Would you repeat that whole sentence for those who didn't get it? Because I think that's just perfect. Start again, Alexis.
So,
Alannah Currie, go on.
Of the Thompson Twins, is now married to Jimmy Courty of the KLF and has a career making furniture out of taxidermized animals.
This is why we're here. This stuff's important.
Oh, that's brilliant. Brilliant.
It must be, living in Brighton, it must be like wandering around a kind of superannuated Stella Street in terms of, surely the place is just stiff with people who used to be on top of the pops, isn't it?
Sometimes still are on top of the pops.
Right.
Nick Cave, Fatboy Slim.
Nick Cave is the great one, because whenever you used to see Nick Cave around Brighton, and he was quite visible around Brighton, he was never not dressed up as Nick Cave. My
youngest son was at college there. He said he'd always see him. He'd be this rail thin, entirely black, wasn't it? Black boots.
I saw him in B&Q, and he was dressed up. Honest to God, I saw him in B&Q, and he was dressed up like Nick Cave. He was buying some screws or something like that.
Yeah.
And I thought and the other guy that used to live in Brighton, that was also like that, was Kevin Rowland from Dexys Midnight Runners.
Oh, right.
Who we saw in Debenhams. In his full Kevin Rowland from Dexys Midnight Runners gear, his latter day, that sort of Italian gangster thing that he does now with the beret and the big bag. He wasn't dressed up. Come on, Eileen. And I sort of think I like that dedication to 24/7.
I too. I'm going to go down to the corner shop and get a pint of milk, and I'm still going to make the effort.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant.
Be completely recognisable, because you either do that or you go completely the other way and go in disguise. You can't go halfway through.
It's a serious point. If you're Nick Cave, and you kind of wanted to be left alone, you would go and live in to pick a place at random, Keighley or somewhere. You wouldn't live in Brighton,
right? Which is where 95% of your constituency lives.
Absolutely,
yeah.
So every day when you go out to get a pint of milk, you're aware you're going to be parading before your public, aren't you?
Yeah. There's a brilliant bit about that, actually, where he talks in the film that he made after his son died, where he talks about going out in Brighton. It's really. Have you seen that film?
No.
I mean, it's a utterly shattering experience watching it. I went to there was a premiere of it down here at the New York Cinema in Brighton, and the film ended and people just filed out in total silence. I mean, really,
I can imagine.
At one point in that, he goes out to get some bread or something like that, and obviously he's still dressed as Nick Cave, and he's in the queue, and the guy behind him sort of taps him on the shoulder and goes, "I just want you to know, we're all with you." It's after his son's died. And Nick Cave says, and in my head, I just think, when did I become a figure of pity? And it's like, oh my God, that's such a sort of, just as an exploration of grief. It's a really...
Well, it also affected the whole community, didn't it, in Brighton? It really did. Everybody sort of felt involved, didn't they?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
So Nick Cave is the kind of local celebrity, and unlike McCartney, he doesn't wander around going,
oh, no.
McCartney is often seen in Soho, but McCartney's philosophy is you never stop. You smile, you keep waving, you don't stop. Because as soon as you stop, you've
got to look in a hurry. Look like you're going somewhere, which indeed you are,
Of course, you've got your life to get on with.
Of course,
It's a funny thing. I wouldn't like, I'm obviously I've met lots of famous people. I wouldn't like to live that kind of life. I really wouldn't like to be able to walk around unmolested. You sometimes see it with other writers. Who are higher profile writers than me, and it's just people come like, no, I wouldn't like that at all. But I guess that's part of the Faustian pact, isn't it?
You've written your Elton book. Just strikes me. Elton doesn't wander around, does he? No. Elton goes to places.
Yeah,
but he doesn't wander around. You never see Elton in the streets. Do you? Am I right in this?
No, he gets out of a large car, doesn't he? It's always very, very
goes into a place.
No chance of him getting stuck in a Pizza Express with a load of autograph hunters.
He did tell me that he takes his kids to Pizza Express. He did, so when the kids were younger, on a Saturday afternoon, they would go into Windsor, which is near where he lives, and they would go to Pizza Express. And he said people are generally really, I said, people bother you all the time. He said, people are basically really nice,
Yeah.
And also, he's been that famous for that long.
Yeah.
That you just, come to an accommodation with it. You know, I doubt he remembers what it's like not to be that. Elton John has been that famous since the year before I was born, and I'm 50.
Yeah.
So that's a long time. You know what I mean? So I think, he seems kind of enormously well adjusted to me. But then I'd said something once to his husband when we did the book. I said, God, this is such a sort of beautiful house, this house in London we're in. And he said, oh, well, you know, Elton can't go out that much. So it's important for the environment that he's in to have beautiful things in it. And because you know, the outside world is not the same as it is for you and me. You know what I mean? It's more circumscribed than that.
Yeah, and to the extent that he has sort of symphonic music playing when he goes out of certain rooms onto the balcony or whatever, isn't it?
I think that was in the cocaine era. I think there was
probably not so much now, but
the fanfare that he used to play when he woke up.
That's right.
So what's he doing now? Because he had a kind of final tour, and then obviously it was interrupted by pandemic.
Back on tour again. He's
incredible
off because it's this enormously long tour that should have been over by now, but these dates need to be fulfilled, and they all got put off. And he just started again in I think he started a couple of weeks ago in America, and then he's got a load of dates in Europe coming up, and then more.
It is a compulsion, though, isn't it? I mean, you know, I remember when he was in court in the High Court with a case with John Reed, however long ago this is, 15 years ago, isn't it? And he was giving evidence in the witness box all day, and then he had to cut the session short so that he could fly to Amsterdam and play a show. I thought, my God, imagine the pressure of that, you know, because most of us, you know, an hour in the witness box would see us out for about a month, wouldn't it? You know,
I think the pre-video generation, the people who grew up having to go out and play, so that kind of ends with groups like the Police and Elvis Costello and the Attractions and the Stranglers. They were the last one, the Jam, Paul Weller. They were the last ones to kind of have to go out and work the gigs. I think those guys can't get out of their systems, and I really understand that and admire it. They just don't feel kind of validated unless they're going to work. They feel they should be getting up at 8 o'clock at night and going on stage somewhere. You know?
I think that's true, and I think that certainly in his case, in Elton's case, he has been a working musician since 1964, right? Yeah. And he was, you know, obviously before he was famous for a long time, he was a jobbing musician.
Yeah.
And if a session came up, you know, it didn't matter who it was, didn't matter if it was the Barron Knights or, you know, the Hollies, you went and did the session because it was good money. And if you went a minute over time, you got double wages and all this kind of thing. And if you got a gig, you were in a small band, you know, you went and you got in the van and you did the gig. You did 3 gigs a night or whatever in weekends. And that's sort of still the way he thinks. Yeah. You know, it's a long time since he got in a van and went anywhere. But
also, what can replace the feeling of going out on a stage and just hearing that roar of applause? I mean, that must be very hard to give up. It's such a big part of who you are, your identity.
It's interesting now because we're seeing, you know, a generation of rock stars really reaching. I mean, you know, particularly because of the sort of coronavirus thing has taken 2 years out of most people's schedules. And you look at the ages of the sort of big rock stars from the 60s and early 70s, they're really old. I mean, Charlie Watts, you know, was 82 when he died.
Yeah.
That was a ripe old age, you know what I mean? And had he not become ill, he would still be on stage. Yeah. McCartney's knocking on 80 now, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He's 80 this year. Yeah.
And you do sort of think, how long can you physically do this for? You know what I mean? I'm 50, I'm absolutely exhausted. The notion of like 80 years old and you're Bob Dylan and a never-ending tour and you've also, you know, I don't know. Maybe this thing where they're all selling their catalogues.
Well, don't forget, less and less is required of you. Bob Dylan now, on a physical level, does very little. Right. Apart from stand there in front of a microphone. Doesn't play the piano, doesn't play the guitar, hardly.
Does not?
No, well, not really. I think he finds playing the guitar very difficult.
Right.
For arthritic reasons, like Keith Richards, and occasionally plays a bit of piano. But no, it's a pretty low stress, undemanding performance. But you know, but he's still doing it, for God's sake. And
you're still traveling long distances, and you're still doing that kind of stuff. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see if people actually do retire. You know, McCartney's doing Glastonbury this year. It's like,
yeah.
This is, you know, you've got nothing left to prove either. you're Paul McCartney. You know, you've had these achievements. You're not going to do anything now that match it. I don't know. I find it a very, very.
But you still are fixated about the idea of trying to excite the next generation of 14-year-olds. You just
the only parallel for it, I think, is football managers.
Right. Okay.
Football managers in the 60s and 70s, you would have thought they've had a lifetime of pressure. They've got more money than God. Why wouldn't they just go and put their feet up?
Yeah.
And they keep coming back. Roy Hodgson.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Managing Watford. Why would you volunteer for that grief? Right. Yeah. Perfectly nice life. Everybody likes you. You get around. You go to the theatre and so forth. You can go on holiday anywhere you want. Why would you volunteer to go and be shouted at by people? They're addicted.
Yeah. Yes. It must be. It
is an addiction.
It must be a form of addiction. Clearly, it is. Because as you say, these people do not. None of them are doing it for the money.
Yeah.
Mick Jagger is not getting out there because he's thinking, God Almighty, I've got mouths to feed, or whatever. You know what I mean? This is, but it would be, like I said, it'd be interesting to see if this sort of wave of people earning vast sums of money for their catalogs, lump sums. And Sting's just sold his for some.
Yeah,
I know, and now sort of producing organic wine, some Italian vineyard, isn't he? I know, fantastic.
It's 300 million or something ridiculous like that for that's a lot of. It'd be interesting to see if that is some sort of incentive to retire from live performance. I mean, I'll be intrigued to see what happens next.
Yeah, so you've obviously spent a lot of your time record shopping. Have you ever been record shopping with Elton?
No, only in a virtual sense. He has a record store in Las Vegas that he's absolutely obsessed with. That does seem completely amazing. They seem to be able to get anything. I don't know its name. And he's always on about that. And sometimes when he's in Vegas, he was like, he'd ring. I'm going to this shop. What do you want? What do you
Is there anything you want?
Oh, I'm good. What can I get you? So have you got any Thompson Twins?
They got an initial success by B.A. Robertson.
Yes.
But I mean, he bought Bernie Taupin a proper original Butcher cover, Beatles, Yesterday and Today, like an unpeeled Butcher cover thing.
Oh, really?
So no, I've never.
I'd love to know what that would cost.
Because he used to do this thing, didn't he? Where every month or whatever it was, we used to go to the Virgin Megastore, didn't he, in London? I think.
He goes to
3 copies of everything.
3 copies of everything were delivered, weren't they? Yeah, and I think he sat down and genuinely listened to them.
Oh God, yeah, he totally listens to me. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. He listens to more music than I do. Yeah. I think he does it via. I think it's Rough Trade. Send him a list of stuff each week, and he buys things off that.
Brilliant.
Things like that. So yes, but I've never had the pleasure of actually going record shopping. In a way, you wouldn't want to, because obviously the volume of stuff he would buy.
I would just be fascinated to see it, because I've seen the bits of film of Elton going around Virgin or HMV or whatever with his driver, I think, behind him, holding a wire basket into which he just kind of flings 3 copies of everything, 1 to go in each of his houses or something.
Well, Danny Baker talks about him going to One Stop, doesn't he, back in the early 70s?
Oh, well, he did, back in those days. Yeah,
going to get behind the counter and actually start playing things to people.
Yeah.
Yes, certain people. Yes.
But what else have you got, Alexis? Have you got any other of your own stuff that you can show us?
Well, I was going to say, what have I brought with me here? I thought you were going to ask me. I've got here. What have I got? I brought this because we're talking about early music that had a real impact on you. This is Lieutenant Pigeon's debut album.
Oh, moldy old music. Oh God, yes.
Which has
that's pretty old, isn't it? I mean,
yes, it is. Yeah, 1972, I think this came out.
Right, okay.
And has an amazing photograph of Lieutenant Pigeon. I mean, what a way for a band to look.
Yeah.
So who were the members of Lieutenant Pigeon? Did they later re-emerge in Gentle Giant?
I'm glad you asked me that, because I also have here a book by Lieutenant Pigeon. And I believe self-published as well.
There is no group that doesn't have a book written about them.
It's an extraordinary book. The reason I'm interested in Lieutenant Pigeon is Mouldy Old Dough was a record that kind of hung over my early life like a dark cloud. I was terrified of it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Kids take against certain...
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had experience of your own children doing this.
Yeah.
I was terrified of Mouldy Old Dough, which we owned. And it took me quite a long time to come to terms with it. And then when I did, I became sort of fascinated by Lieutenant Pigeon. And it's such a sort of bizarre story. This book is incredible because nothing happens whatsoever in it. If you think about the arc of Lieutenant Pigeon's career, it goes like that. There's one moment where there's about 10. And that occurs on about page 24. On and on it drivels about absolutely.
So then one of them opens an antique shop, and
they keep plugging away. They keep
doing it.
They're playing German air bases, and
I don't know how they're still seem to be getting money. Neville Staples from the Specials starts a record right at the height of the Specials fame and signs Lieutenant Pigeon. No. What is going on? Yeah, it's absolutely bizarre. And the other thing I love about Mouldy Old Dough is I discovered this from this book. The reason that Mouldy Old Dough became successful, it was initially successful in Belgium, where it was used as the theme music to the 6 o'clock news. Can you imagine a news program that begins with anything less appropriate? This sort of lumbering kind of.
Yeah.
It's like having Nellie the Elephant by the Toy Dolls as a theme to the news or something like that. I find them completely fascinating.
Well, no wonder they kept going. They must have made a few bob out of that, I would have thought.
One would assume so. There's kind of a bit of a cult based around them. Jarvis Cocker got them to reform.
Neville Staples, Jarvis Cocker.
This is amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Jarvis Cocker picked Mouldy Old Dough as one of his Desert Island Discs and got them to reform at a gig somewhere in East London. And apparently they were quite difficult. They were quite sort of starry, the members of Lieutenant Pigeon.
Well, they weren't pathetically grateful.
No, they had a bit of an attitude on them. There's a brilliant book where he says, one of them, I don't know if it's Nigel Fletcher or Rob Woodward, goes, people come up to me and they go, I love that record, that single you made. And I always say back to them, which one do you mean? I have made 23 singles.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's probably the one that came out on Neville Staples' record label that no one's ever heard about, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing. So, yes, that's Lieutenant Pigeon.
That's brilliant. That's
what
fantastic.
Else you
got? In some small corner of foreign field, there's a rock band.
Is forever Lieutenant Pigeon.
Yeah, that's being celebrated, who no one's talked about for years. Isn't that wonderful?
If you go to the Museum of Pop in Coventry, the piano that Hilda Woodward played on Mouldy Old Dough is on display. Well worth seeing.
Go on.
No, carry on.
Okay, I'm just saying, is it the real piano, or is it, is it like Fragments of the True Cross? They're all arguing about, have you? There's a museum in Halifax who claims that they've got it. Yeah,
it's just a replica.
Yeah.
I brought these. This is my Adam and the Ants collection.
Right.
Oh, excellent.
I brought this because I was sort of thinking
You've
about
got to love the ants.
Music that impacted on me, when I was younger. And I don't think I've ever loved any group as sort of with the kind of energy and the kind of, I don't know, I've never loved anything as much as I loved Adam and the Ants for about 18 months in 1980 to 1981. They were the first band that I kind of properly nailed the only band I've ever really nailed my colours to the mast of and gone, this is what will define, and it was such a sort of mad, all-consuming thing. I don't know why I picked Adam and the Ants. I was spoilt for choice. It was 1980. I could have become a Numanoid. I could have
Depeche Mode. Yeah, Human League.
Two-Tone. All these things were happening, but for some reason it was Adam and the Ants. And what I found in here, this is the extent.
So you're a card-carrying ant person.
I am a card-carrying ant person. I've even got in here. Oh God, it's not there.
Oh Lord!
I was going to produce my Adam and the Ants flexi. Of their cover version of YMCA, which is retitled ANTS, and like all other Adam and the Ants songs, is about how brilliant Adam and the Ants are.
That's right, they all are, aren't they?
But
Marco Merrick, Terry Lee. Gary Tibbs, and yours truly. Gary Tibbs seems so kind of lumpen, doesn't it?
Yeah. He's not quite on the. He came later, didn't he? He replaced.
He did. It was Johnny. It was a fly-by-night. Gary Tibbs turned up everywhere. The Vibrators, Roxy Music. Is that right?
He'd been in Roxy Music before, I think. Indeed, that's right. Yeah.
It was just the other thing that I loved about Adam and the Ants, in retrospect, I didn't sort of realize it at the time, was that on the B-sides of Adam and the Ants' big hit singles, such as Prince Charming, he would put songs that were left over from the earlier incarnation of Adam and the Ants, when their oeuvre was entirely about sort of sadomasochism.
Yeah.
And that was quite a sort of eye-opening experience when you were 10 years old. Beat My Guest is the B-side of
That's right. From that Whipping My Valise period. Yeah.
I never realised this.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Well, his Dirk Wears White Socks thing is all about flirting with kind of with kind of Nazi fashion and stuff, isn't it? I think, we can say that,
No, it totally does. It's got
suddenly became the kind of pantomime buccaneer, It's
an amazing thing to do. And I remember sort of, obviously, in those days, you bought a single and you wanted your money's worth, you always listened to the B-side, turning it over and being very aware and not having a clue what a song like Beat My Guest or Whipping My Valise was about, but being very aware that it was something wasn't quite right here, that there was some sort of thing happening, that I sort of shouldn't really be listening to this. Listening to it. And, the thing about all of that, I suppose, about Adam and the Ants, generally, is because they were my first real musical love. I never, like a lot of first loves, I never really quite got over them. You know what I mean? It's that John Betjeman poem where he says, Sung by Bells, where he talks about Peggy Puricust being the first girl that he loved, and he says, something along the lines of, I loved her so much that every girl I've loved since has had the look of Peggy Puricust. And it was like that with Adam and the Ants. I think there are certain things about them that still inform my music taste now. I automatically like any band that has two drummers. So unnecessary. You don't need it's so sort of surface strip. I love that idea. I like bands that wear makeup. I like the bands. I particularly like artists who, where liking the music is a doorway into other stuff.
Yeah.
So, by liking Adam and the Ants, he would talk in interviews about Joe Orton. Orton. I did my final dissertation at university about Joe Orton. Ultimately,
entirely because of
yes. That's why did I pick up a Joe Orton book in the first place? It was years later. I thought, Adam Ant, and I find that sort of the way it continues to sort of influence what I like. I like bands that are extravagant and wear makeup. I like all, what I mean? And it's this sort of kernel of
theatre
something that happened to me in 1980 that properly did something to my brain. You know what I mean? And that never quite sort of got beyond it. I sort of love that. I love the idea that something like that can sort of still impact on you 40 years later.
That's brilliant. He'd be very thrilled if he gets to hear about this.
Well, I hope he does. I've met him. I've interviewed him, which was just
and thus have told him how devoted you are.
Absolutely, totally. It was the biggest thing of all the people that I've interviewed. Meeting Adam Ant was like, well, you actively sort of changed my life.
That's fantastic.
Point this sort of moment, and meeting him was just.
So that was the most significant interview for you.
Yeah, personally, and then I interviewed Marco Perroni, which was even better. So it was I met Adam and Marco. It was. I was really, 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 really nervous in a way that I don't get nervous interviewing people. I really don't.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he would have been so.
Is that just that's quite interesting though? Is that just because he was a huge star when you were a kid?
I didn't want him to be a huge disappointment.
I was going to say that would be it, isn't it? There's so much to lose.
He was like Lou Reed or something.
You see, I've got this theory that you can never really be absolutely a huge fan of anybody who wasn't already well known when you were a kid.
You can never be a huge fan of anybody.
I think if you meet anybody if you meet Paul McCartney or whatever, or you meet, all right. If you can meet, Cristiano Ronaldo, or you can meet Bobby Charlton. Bobby Charlton too long ago for you, but you know what I mean. Somebody who was a famous footballer when you were a kid.
Yeah,
that's the person you want to meet. Still, when you're
that's
way
true.
older.
That relationship's set in stone.
It never changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it's like the idea that you can't have a hero that's younger than you. Heroes have to be older.
Weird. That's true. Yes,
they have to be older, or it just doesn't seem right. They can't be a hero because you're not looking up to them.
Maybe it has to have, particularly if you are in the business that we're in, it has to have some connection to the era before you were doing this professionally.
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
You were purely a fan.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because otherwise, you kind of see it coming. You know what I mean? You can see the mechanism. I knew you'd make it because you were managed by so-and-so, and they were talking about you 2 years ago or whatever, you know.
Yeah, and also there's something about the idea that the moment you started, in my case, in 1978, getting free records, that changed my relationship with the people who made those records, because I didn't pay for them anymore.
Yeah.
And if I paid for them, it meant so much more. My investment in them was enormous. I have to make sure I got something back.
And that's a really interesting thing about music now, isn't it? Because there are many wonderful things about the way music can be accessed now. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I've spent the last couple of years. So I made a concerted thought in the second lockdown. I thought, I am going to get into jazz. I'm going to learn jazz. I will understand jazz. I'm going to properly do it. Yeah. And I tried to do it before, a few years before, and it hadn't worked. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
And this time it did. Yeah. And I thought, why did it work this time? Why did I find all this music on? Because I had Spotify, because I had streaming, because if I read a book and it went, this particular version of Creole Love Call by Duke Ellington is there, I could find that right at that minute. I could find that version of it. So that's a wonderful thing about streaming. But the other side of that is that you always value things that you have to work for more.
Yeah.
Of course you do.
Completely.
And you had to work a bit. You know, when I was sort of growing up, when I was a teenager, if you wanted to hear the third Velvet Underground album, you couldn't get it where you had to go to London. They didn't have it they had the first two, but they didn't have the third one for some reason. I had to go to London to buy.
It's got 200 miles.
Yeah, it was. No, but by then, in fairness, David, by then we'd moved.
Oh, well, whatever.
Yeah.
And sort of
so that's why you moved, so you could buy the third Velvet Underground album.
And you know, there was an intrinsic value in that struggle and that desire.
There is.
And I wonder if there is any sort of modern equivalent of that now, because
I don't. Not where music is concerned, because it's not a physical object, is it, for most people? I was going to ask you, because you're obviously still in the thick of this as the Guardian's senior music writer or whatever. Do you still get sent loads of stuff?
No, not really. You get sent. Everything gets sent via
a stream. Yeah,
you get streams. Yeah,
it's not the same.
But you're not sent. But do you send vinyl box sets anymore?
Probably no, not really. No. You can, if I review something and I like it, I ask, can I get a copy of it?
Yeah.
Those days of when I worked for Mixmag, it was just
stuff.
Oh yeah,
the joy of
every
stuff.
night you'd go home, you rip open the jiffy bags, you go home, just weighing down. I've got a crack. The back room of our house, which is just the next door room here, still has a crack in the ceiling.
Really?
From the sheer weight of vinyl that's up in the roof above it. Yeah.
And that was in itself, and it certainly, when I was working at Mixmag, that in itself was like an economy, and you could then take the stuff you didn't want, and it's bags and bags of stuff I didn't want, and that went to the record and tape exchange, and it was exchanged for vouchers, and I bought things that I wanted, and And that was the point where my record collection really, expanded. Completely out of control. But no, you don't get any. There's very, very, very seldom do you get sent an album or a CD. Very, very seldom.
What a sad sentence that is, Mark.
It is.
Oh my goodness,
that's your wages gone.
Even worse. Particularly right-on journalists, music journalists, have as part of their email signature, whatever name, wherever you work for, please do not send me physical product because of its impact on the environment.
Oh no, really?
Getting the physical product
that's absurdly principled.
God's sake.
That is ludicrously principled.
I thought that was amazing.
That's why you do it.
Very, very principled, but it's so antithetical. That wasn't the entire reason why I got into music journalism, but the notion that people would give you records for nothing was such a huge part. It was like, that's just brilliant. I didn't pay for it, and someone how great is that?
But also, I grew up wanting, because I used to look at entirely whatever cash I had. I looked at it entirely in terms of how many records could this buy.
Absolutely.
That's all you bothered about. Didn't want anything else at all.
Yeah.
You got a pound note in 1968 or something. You could buy 3 singles.
Really?
Isn't that right? There were 6 and 8 each.
Will you pass me?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think exactly 3 for a pound. Yeah.
Wow.
There used to be a shop near when we lived in Yorkshire, John Menzies in Leeds, and I could never work out why. They had this box of singles on the counter, recent stuff from the charts, 20p each, right? And I bought, like, this is just brilliant. This when singles were like whatever, 99p or something like that. Great, 20p. Ex-jukebox singles. What thing they were, the
missing the middle.
Yes, probably missing most of the grooves as well because those tone arms.
I tell you what didn't sound very
unplayable.
Good. Single Ghosts by Japan. I remember buying that.
Ghosts
by Japan sounded like somebody was frying bacon. Like, they should still be a full English breakfast while singing. So yeah, it was plus and minus to doing that.
Just the idea that Ghost by Japan was ever a jukebox thing.
It was on a jukebox. That surely is the 5 pence piece that ends the party, isn't it? Let's stick this on. Hey, everybody. What a floor filler. Oh, God.
That's a very bizarre thing, isn't it? To put on it.
Yeah.
So what's your current enthusiasm? What are you currently buying, listening to, whatever?
Or current. I'm buying, honest to God, I'm buying lots of jazz. I've discovered.
I bought loads of jazz.
Yeah.
You think it's an age thing, David? You think there comes a point in a man's life where
I don't think well, if it was an age thing, yours and mine wouldn't be happening simultaneously. But I don't know. It's kind of space in my life to listen to that stuff.
Mm.
And
I've got a theory that I think my feeling about jazz is that a lot of the jazz I like is just because it's instrumental, actually. Yeah. That if you're listening to somebody singing a song, then you're being required to have some kind of relationship with them and whatever part of their life they're in and whatever thoughts they're trying to get across. But if you listen to So What by Miles Davis, very obvious choice, you can think any number of different interpretations of that every time you hear it. It's wonderful.
I thought that's a really interesting idea. That's a really, really, really interesting idea.
And the weird thing with me is the stuff I'm listening to is jazz from the early 70s. So it's really quite old.
Right.
But was kind of strange, it's Bitches Brew and Post Bitches Brew and loads of things like that.
And you completely ignored this at the time.
No, I didn't. I didn't know. Listen, I've always had this thing about music. People say to me, "What should I be listening to?" And I always say the same thing: you should be listening to whatever you feel like listening to. You shouldn't go out and chase music. Music comes to you, and it comes to you, and a lot of time it finds you not in. and then eventually it arrives one day and you are in. Well, that thing, you're on the wavelength of it, and if you're on the wavelength of one thing, you might be on the wavelength of the thing next to it, and it might open up a little world. And that's what it's done with me latterly. So loads of these records I heard years ago and kind of understood them and appreciated them, but didn't like them like I like them now.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it's a lovely thing, I think.
It is.
When something that you've previously found off-putting or forbidding or whatever in terms of music, sort of beckons you in. I really
absolutely. No, you're finally ready. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's very often something made decades ago. It's like Bob Dylan always says, if you want the future, go in the past.
Yeah.
It's probably been done before, but you weren't aware of it, or you weren't on the wavelength of it.
Yeah.
So I should point out, as the Guardian's rock review, there is lots of current music that I like as well. I'm not strictly just sitting here pretending to like Yard Act while I'm actually listening to Duke Ellington. It's not. It doesn't. No, you got loads of sort of.
Did you watch the Brits this week?
Yes.
Now the Brits, you see, again, a physical product, whatever. One of the great excitements of when the Brits used to come around, although we were always cynical about it, was that you got to go, and it was a bit of a beano, and it was a punch up, and the gents or whatever there was. So, do you go, or do you watch it, and you don't? Okay.
No,
did you watch it?
I did watch it. I used to go to the Brits. I used to have to go to the Brits. And I never
had to go.
Well, it's for work, I had to write something.
Oh, sure,
of course.
I wasn't sort of sitting there having
and then file something by 10 o'clock. You'd be writing it during the show.
I had a succession of disasters at the Brits. One year, I got the train up from Brighton. I was on the train. I thought there's this very odd smell in this train carriage. Really pleasant smell. And I realised to my horror that the bag I had, which was like a courier bag, sort of waterproof courier bag, the cat that we had then had urinated in it shortly before I left the house. And because it was waterproof, it contained, as well as my laptop in one section, it just contained a load of
Oh my God!
I tried to clean it up on the train. It's a very difficult thing to do. Find enough tissues on the train.
Yeah.
And I remember arriving at the Brits with this bag that by now is literally dripping with
and reeking
at the same time.
Containing a malfunctioning laptop that you've got to write a piece on.
The laptop, luckily, was another bit of it. And I remember arriving at the same time as Beyonce on the red carpet, and the study in contrast we presented at that moment.
Yeah.
Awful. So that was one year.
That's wonderful.
The year that finished me with the Brits was the year that Prince played. I can't remember what it was. It might have been in Earl's Court that year. And Prince was playing, and where I was, you couldn't hear Prince over coked up dickhead.
Yeah.
All the way through Prince. And there was just this moment where I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. This has nothing to do with anything that I like about, the event itself was all right that year, but it was like this environment is just.
Yes.
And then, they started televising it on the same night when they learned how to do the mute button.
Yeah.
People swearing, they started doing it on the night. The Brits has a really big problem. And the problem the Brits has is, who is it for? Because my kids don't sit down.
No.
You would struggle to find a teenager that will sit down and watch 2 hours of live television at a set time. Sit down at 7 o'clock and watch 2 hours of live television. They don't work that way anymore. That ship's sailed. They watch stuff on YouTube. They watch stuff on.
And also, there's no drama. It's just David. I was talking about just before this because I watched nearly all of it actually, and it's just a load of people getting on with each other and acknowledging and saying how wonderful they are, and how much I missed. Like the inner teenager in me really missed that 90s thing when it was kind of Pulp, Supergrass, Oasis, Blur, Massive Attack, all kind of warring armies, all having a pop at each other. It was fantastic.
The other thing they kept saying this year, I noticed the host, Mo Gilligan, kept going on about sort of how hedonistic it was. Oh, and everybody's having a few drinks and we're all doing shots and da-da-da-da. And these people would come and collect their awards and they looked like they'd come from some sort of mindfulness meeting,
Completely.
People were not sort of staggering about, and they're awful. You see Brits in the mid-90s.
I can remember back in the day, you used to watch bands, and they nearly, I can remember Blur all studiously lighting up cigarettes as their name was announced,
pouring
so that
a
they
drink.
could go up on stage and have a cigarette on the go.
You always had to have one member putting a drink on the lectern.
Someone would be carrying a.
Does
bottle
anybody
of lager.
still do that?
It didn't look like it. I
don't.
didn't see anybody do anything like that. I didn't see anybody make any kind of speech that suggested. And that's fair. Fair dues. This is what happens now. It's a different generation, and it's not 1996 anymore. Does it make for less exciting television than that sort of moment when Liam Gallagher hoves into view with kind of saucer eyes, and something's going to go disastrous? That's really interesting. That's just as a viewer, that's interesting.
Yeah. Isn't it also just, I'm genuinely interested in your view on this. Isn't it also just a huge part of the of the excitement around pop music is that it's a world, and some of it goes off in that direction and some of it goes off in that direction. This bit is a bit, combustible and this bit isn't. And you get to the point now where you can't tolerate, and it seems that the world of popular music can't tolerate anything that's at the edges.
Yes, I think that's really true. Also, I think the world of pop music's expanded a lot. It's very, very, think about, this phrase alternative music. Well, the world of pop music has expanded to such a degree that there is no alternative.
No,
music.
absolutely.
Unless it's some sort of loony thing that the Quieters are writing about that clearly nobody is going to actually buy. It's somebody banging a bit of wood and screaming. There's no pop music. We live in a post-tribal world. Nobody defines themselves sort of sartorially by the music they like. And in some ways, that's a wonderful thing. I look at my eldest daughter. I'll give you a very good example. Night before last, picked my eldest daughter up from a thing she was at, and she puts a phone on in the car and starts playing music, and she's playing this music by Labyrinth, who's an electronic producer.
How old is she?
She's nearly 16.
Yeah.
And then she goes, I was like, oh, this is quite good. Yeah, I was quite into this, And she says, I've got to play the tune that everybody's loving at the moment. I will give you £500 if you can guess what that tune is.
Well, I'm going to guess it's not anything modern.
It's certainly not.
Okay. No, it's going to be it's going to be Carole King or somebody, or it's going to be
Doobie
George
Brothers.
The Doobie Brothers.
Getting more. I'm going to tell you. Right Down the Line by Jerry Rafferty.
No.
Yes. Right Down the Line by Johnny
No.
which apparently has been used. It's in the iTunes download chart. It was used on a teenage TV series called Euphoria to soundtrack this very dramatic moment. And, and I love that there is this complete openness to anything.
Oh, that's a brilliant.
Yeah. You look at the playlist my daughter puts together, and it will leap about. It'll be Tyler the Creator followed by the Moonbeam song by Harry Nilsson. And that's a great thing.
Well, because she probably, as Mark and I have said this for years, our kids are all now grown up. She probably has no sense of musical chronology.
None.
It's it's music. It's all perpetually there forever.
Yes,
I was reading last night. Do you know how many new tunes are uploaded to Spotify every day?
No.
60,000.
Wow.
Good God.
Oh my
so that the universe of available music increases at that rate, and it never decreases.
Right.
Yeah.
It just grows.
Nothing gets deleted. Absolutely.
Neil Young's music, of course. That's all.
That's so interesting. But I'm fascinated by that idea because I remember my eldest lad when he must have been about, I don't know, 17 or something like that, knowing that Nirvana and the Doors were both groups whose lead singer had died, but he had no idea which one came before the other and whether one might have influenced one or whatever. He had no idea of the chronology. And it's funny because we all grew up when you just think, well, that influenced that, and then they heard that and became Roxy Music, and then Roxy Music.
It doesn't work that way. And also, the thing that I've noticed is that the music from the past that seems to resonate most clearly with my daughter's generation is music where there is not a sort of sonic key within the music that it is old. So the sort of heritage artists that her generation to really like are Fleetwood Mac, Elton John, Queen, right? It's not really the Beatles. It's not really the stuff. Because if you put Revolver on, it is an incredible record. It is a wonderful, forward-thinking people, but it sounds like the 60s. The sonic quality of it, the quality of Rumours by Fleetwood Mac is not that different to a current record. There's no disjunction there.
No, that's true.
Now, would you say the same thing? It's really interesting. This my phone's ringing. I'm going to ignore it. Would you say the same thing about Abbey Road? I always think Abbey Road sounds more like the modern world.
Yeah.
Something like Revolver.
That's why it's partly why it's so popular, because they also look like the most modern version of the group. There's nothing dated about it. If you look at Sgt. Pepper or any of those at a certain time, but they could just be an indie group signed 2 years ago.
Yes, they could be big.
They just could.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that the sort of there was this kind of shortening of the 60s, wasn't there, in the 90s, where it was like the first Beatles album that you were supposed to pay any attention to was Rubber Soul. The pop era, that's kind of where they got good, ostensibly. A lot of cobblers, that is, but that's by the by. And it's been shortened again. Do you know what I mean? And I think in the 90s, if you played I Saw Her Standing There, that did not sound like music that was around at that point. But if you played Tomorrow Never Knows or that sounded more like the music of the current moment. So maybe it's always been going on, but I think it's really interesting that the stuff that has resonance or seems to have resonance with my daughter's generation, and this is purely empirical, I don't know, they may all be off listening to the Beatles for all I know, but it definitely seems to be things that wouldn't sound out of place if you played them. Do you know what I mean? With that kind of music, So it's an intriguing thing. It's
fascinating.
Because how do you navigate through 60,000 new tracks a day at a time when all the gatekeepers have gone?
Yes.
There's not a functioning music press. Teenagers aren't going to read what I write in The Guardian. No. There isn't a John Peel. There isn't a Top of the Pops. There isn't. So how do you do it? How do you?
Well, they do it through the mates, don't they? I suppose instead of that, you just have your network of mates, and it somehow finds its way to you.
Yeah, they say, "Gosh, you should hear this person, Joni Mitchell. She's terrific."
But then the other thing that's happened, I will shut up about this in a minute, but it is something that's sort of been troubling me, is that my other daughter, who is 12, everything she likes is mediated through TikTok. Right? It's not through streaming; it's through TikTok, and TikTok is nuts. Basically, because anybody can upload a video to TikTok and put whatever music they want in the background of it.
Yeah.
The stuff that she likes is makes my daughter look like someone that only likes one very specific kind of music. So it will leap from this sort of weird Japanese stuff that she likes that sounds a bit like sort of punk pop, but with sort of squeaky female vocals, to, she came to me and she goes, do you know a song called Tiptoe Through the Tulips? Yes. And she said, well, I really like that song. I was like, oh, Tiny Tim. What? I said, Tiny Tim. And she said, I want to see, I'll find it on YouTube for you. Her absolute horror at the sight of Tiny Tim.
Yes.
Who she described as looking like stranger danger. Which I so it's even more. TikTok is even weirder and more divorced. And there's these things that happened where there's a band called Mother Mother, very minor Canadian indie band.
Yeah.
No consequence whatsoever. And for some reason, one of their tracks from a 7-year-old album became a thing on TikTok. It's called Hayloft. And Mother Mother, off the back of that, are now touring Europe. I mean, I think they're playing what used to be the Town and Country Club in London, off the back of this one song becoming a thing, completely at random. They don't know how it happened.
No, absolutely.
I think that really,
what a lottery.
Yeah, it's a total lottery.
It is.
In some ways, I quite like the idea that it's not to do with the
lottery.
amount of money that you've got invested in you. It's not that you're signed to this particular label and subjected to this kind of marketing campaign.
But it's also, do you not think, this is the interesting thing, is that you used to have a window in which you could make it when you were like 23 or whatever. Whereas now, people do things at 23 when they're 23 that don't happen until they're 57 or something.
Yeah.
Because all this stuff has a really long life. You look at things like, I was writing something recently about Toto. The revival of Africa happened in a way that none of them could believe it. They'd almost given up, you know what I mean? Years later, re-emerges, and they're going back on tour.
Well, and also no sense of, the lack of credibility that Toto had at the time.
No, absolutely.
No, that's all gone.
Care.
Because it's just the sound of the record. It's all
they don't know what they look like. Exactly. There's no music press to pour scorn on them,
No, and it doesn't matter what they look like. You can't see them anyway.
No.
So that you're absolutely right. This stuff can suddenly come back. And suddenly this minor Canadian indie band have got what would have been quite a healthy career,
Yeah.
Well, we were talking to Curtis Stigers the other day, and the story of Curtis Stigers and Nick Lowe and What's So Funny About Peace, Love and Understanding is absolutely the most classic case of this, that it ended up on the soundtrack of The Bodyguard, and it's barely there at all, but it changed Nick Lowe's life.
Completely changed his life.
This, 25,
Curtis
30
used
years
to play it. He campaigned to have it on the record, and it's still, it's that record sold. Was it 44 million copies worldwide? That was a while ago. It's more than that now. Completely transformed his life.
So I was thinking after the Jerry Rafferty incident in the car, I was thinking about Jerry Rafferty generally, and I thought, who was the other guy in Steelers Wheel?
Joe Egan.
Joe Egan. Joe Egan doesn't really appear to have done anything since he was in Steelers Wheel, presumably because Joe Egan doesn't need to do that.
I'm sure he does.
I wrote Stuck in the Middle with You, and that all those songs that will perpetually have a life, perpetually gentle. I'm always fascinated by that idea of there's just what you can do one thing. You can just do one.
Oh, it absolutely fascinates me.
Well, also you can usually say that there's one song that pays for everything.
Yeah,
it's golden brown rather than all the rest of the Stranglers catalogue put together.
I put this question to songwriters. I always say the same thing because the Sting's publisher told me this years ago. He said, I go anywhere in the world and I check into a hotel room and I put on the radio and within an hour I will hear a Sting song and it will be Every Breath You Take.
Yeah.
And I put this question to loads of songwriters. Come on, it's one song. And they all go, oh yeah, it's one song. It's one song. When they get the PRS or whatever, it's one song. 20 years later, 30 years later, it's golden brown. It's True, Spandau Ballet. It's those kind of things just go on forever. And the world of Spotify and streaming means it goes on even more because once you go on those playlists, you never come off.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it just rolls around perpetually, maybe paying you very little, but if you're getting it at that rate.
Yeah. And also that means, so therefore, if it's always one song, that means you could just do one thing. You could just have, I'm trying to think of an example of someone that's had literally a one-off hit that has probably paid for, there isn't a Christmas record, there isn't Stop the Cavalry.
How about Black? Something like that. Wonderful
Life. Yeah.
That might be an example.
And
then there are people who had one single. Elvis Costello had Oliver's Army, and then suddenly that's just written out now. That was his big earner. I feel some sympathy for him there.
Oh no, absolutely. But I just love that idea that you might do just one thing and it clicks in such a way that who wrote Hooked on a Feeling? Because Hooked on a Feeling suddenly seems to have become omnipresent. It's in loads of films. It's all over the place. It was in Guardians of the Galaxy. It was in something else I watched the other night. It was in Ally McBeal all the time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So that's kind of an example. Whoever made, I don't even know.
Yeah, Bobby Bluebell and Young at Heart looked like it was going to be one of those. It's kind of fizzled out slightly.
Yeah.
Three lions on the shirt with Ian Brody. That's got to be a
fantastic movie. I imagine so.
Oh my God,
but that's linked to something.
Yeah, it's
specifically going to get wheeled out. It's when you do something that's not necessarily linked to anything.
Yeah.
It just has that. But what a shame for the members of Lieutenant Pigeon that didn't happen to Mouldy Old.
Maybe it did happen as a German news sting. So
news sting in it, but
they got that.
They're not still using it. It'd be brilliant if they were.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Ghent and heard Mouldy Old on the telly, but maybe I'll try and through the auspices.
See if you can do it.
Some sort of TikTok meme about.
Jay, we ought to have the greatest record of all time.
Yeah, we should do that.
We traditionally end with your recommendation for well, it's going to be by the Ants probably, or
it isn't. I'm gonna. Do you want the greatest record of all time? My favorite of all time.
Oh, we'll choose whatever you like.
The greatest record of all time is the first Velvet Underground album. It is. It just is.
Okay. Yeah.
There's
he's offering the "it just is" defense, which is
that's the Dave Hepworth argument.
Yes, I was going to say
there's conjecture, and then there's my opinion, or which is right. It's not to be debated. No.
Oh, there's something I want to talk to you about David, on that subject. We'll save for afterwards, from one of your books that I was reading, and I was like, "That's not a fact. That's not a fact. That's just an opinion." Anyway,
he does that all the time.
So yeah, I think that's the greatest. That's the sort of monumental achievement of rock music for me. Anyway, it's something that it goes again. I heard it when I was very, very young. I heard it when I was 12 years old for the first time, and I had it on last night, and I thought, God, this is just. I never tire of it. I never ever tire of it. My favorite single of all time, this is slightly different, is "Stepping Out" by Joe Jackson.
Oh wow! Oh, amazing. Joe Jackson's an interesting case, I think. Those first two Joe Jackson records were fantastic.
Right.
I interviewed him twice for the NME. I loved it. I went to see him loads of times. But I almost don't want this to get back to him, but there's no warmth in the concept of Joe Jackson. There is no warmth. He always hated the press, even if they were trying to write nice things about him and promote him. He just doesn't have that kind of way of selling himself and making himself lovable. It's just it's just the music. And that's a shame, because those songs are so good, and he deserves to be much bigger and better.
I think "Stepping Out" is just it's just a completely perfect record. It's the
that whole album.
Yeah.
Was it Night and Day?
Night and Day.
It's really good record.
But that song in particular is the moment when, just for me, when lightning struck. Everything about it. I love music that makes you think about that moment when you're younger than I am now, and you're getting ready to go out.
Yeah.
Anything can happen now. I'm about to go out. The promise, I call it the promise of the night. Music that sounds like the promise of the night ahead.
Yeah.
And you might meet, cop off with somebody, or you might this or that, or you might take some drugs or whatever it is.
Yeah. That
moment when you're sort of 18 or in your early 20s, where you're getting ready and it's really exciting and you think anything can happen.
Yes. Yeah.
I can be more specific than this. It almost dovetails with my theory that all great pop music is about going into rooms.
Oh, right. Okay. So it's
about entering. I entered a room. You know what I mean? Okay. I walked up to her and I asked her if she wanted to dance.
Jackie DeShannon.
Or the Thunder Road, which is kind of, similar thing. The screen door slams. She comes outside. She gets in the car. You know what I mean?
You think Marvin Gaye is coming into a room as he goes, "I'll bet you're wondering how I knew." You know, at that point.
It's a natural way to begin a song is with a, you know.
Yeah.
He walked into the party like walking into a yacht.
But the problem with that is, right, that is one of the all-time great opening lines. You walk into the party like you're walking onto a yacht.
Yeah.
Right? You can see the guy, you know.
Yeah.
He owns the place.
Yeah.
What rhymes with yacht?
Unfortunately, apricot.
That's right.
And then, subsequently in the song, you had one eye in the mirror as you watched yourself gavotte.
Gavotte. Yeah.
Where is this party happening? The 18th century.
Yes.
It's meant to be on Warren Beatty, isn't it? Where did gavotte come into?
I'll tell you what, though, just one thing about You're So Vain. It is a fucking brilliant record still. My God, it's a brilliant record.
And if you turn it up loud, if you listen to your headphones, you can hear the Mick Jagger back.
You can hear, you don't
clearly.
even have to turn it up. You can hear Mick Jagger really well. He works so well on that record.
It does.
I have two things to say on the subject of You're So Vain. One is that I think once you know it's Mick Jagger, right, singing, you can only hear Mick Jagger singing.
Yes.
It's like when somebody tells you that the end of Gerard Depardieu's nose looks like a penis. And you look at Gerard Depardieu from that, all you can see is this man who has a penis in his nose.
That's true.
It ruins it for you. It doesn't ruin it. It doesn't ruin your something. And once you know it so sounds like Mick Jagger. It's so obvious.
Yeah.
That overwhelms it.
It's a brilliant record.
And the fact that she's still never given and she shouldn't.
She has done it loads of times.
But she's never made it absolutely clear.
Oh, yeah, but because it doesn't matter for crying out loud, does it?
It may not be true.
Compared to the record is just brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
That whisper at the beginning and all that.
Yeah.
Son of a gun. And all
yes.
that. God, it's just perfect, that record.
The little acoustic guitar.
I run a club night in Brighton and sometimes in London called Late Night Minicab FM. And the concept behind Late Night Minicab FM is when you're out and you've had a few drinks maybe, and you get into a cab and the cab driver is playing Mellow Magic, one of those kind of stations.
Yeah.
At that point, in the back of the cab, in the early hours of the morning, you're slightly drunk. That music sounds like the greatest music you've ever heard in your entire life. Yeah. And it also makes you feel like you're in the closing scenes of a film for some reason.
Yes.
So that's what we play at this club. And You're So Vain gets played a lot at that. And the effect that song still has on a pub full of slightly drunk 40-year-old people beggars belief. I mean, it's kind of people get on tables and scream along to it.
Fabulous.
It's a wonderful.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece.
It really is a masterpiece.
It is.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.